Hello and welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik. According to UNESCO, 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water. However, only 3% of all this water is fresh water. Out of 3% of that fresh water, 70% is trapped in ice and snow. All these figures go to show how fresh water is indeed a limited resource. UNESCO also predicts that by 2030, water scarcity could potentially displace somewhere between 24 to 700 million people. Water is a resource needed for virtually every aspect of life. The scarcity of water is an impending doom. Today, we will be discussing the reasons for water scarcity and the way we can move forward and tackle it. We will also discuss how innovations in technology can help water sustainability. Finally, we'll discuss how, as individuals, we need to hear the ringing of this alarm and be more responsible in our usage of water. We're joined right now with Sardar Mohammad Tariq, who is the CEO of Pakistan Water Partnership. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Tariq, so why is water becoming increasingly scarce?
First of all, one must realize that God has created a fixed amount of water over this universe. With all the technology, people have not been able to even add one drop of water. Even primary school students know the H2O is the formula to make water, but nobody has been able to make water. So it is a fixed amount against extremely increasing demand. Demand because of increase of population, demand because of increase of food requirement, demand because of increase of energy requirement, environmental requirement, industrial requirement. So all the demands are increasing manifold, where the amount of water is fixed. And then coming to the regions, if we are in the South Asia also has a fixed amount of water. And we've seen the population astronomically growing in South Asia. Coming to Pakistan specific, again, you'll see that we were only 35 million in West Pakistan at the time of partition. Today we are over 208 million.
Mr. Tariq,
water has remained the same.
You mentioned
against that the population has increased manifold. It's a geometrical progression, and it's increasing extremely at a very fast rate.
Mr. Tariq, so you mentioned here how there is a physical amount of water present. UNDP found that economic water scarcity is more prevalent than physical water scarcity. What can you tell us about that? Is it the mismanagement of water that's the problem here?
It's a multiple issues that we have to address in water management. One is increasing demand, okay. The second is the use of water, that how we are using it. You see, more than 90% of water is being used in the agriculture sector. Now that is a criminal. People are producing much higher crops, much higher productivity of crops at a much less water. So there are technologies available. Pakistan has not adopted those technologies. Similarly, if we look into Karachi city alone, at one time, there was 360 million gallons of water, untreated water, going to the sea. Not only polluting the sea, killing all the marine life there also. If you recycle that, you add another 360 million of recycled water into Karachi city. So those technologies are available with us. And similarly, there's saline water. Now, technologies have developed where the agriculture production can be done without any hindrance or without any harm to the crops with the saline water. Technologies are there.
So, Mr. Tariq,
and Pakistan has not adopted to any of that technology, with the result that we are now in a stage of very acute water situation.
Mr. Tariq, so you're mentioning here, how there is so much mismanagement of water. I wonder if we try to tackle the mismanagement, do you think that the 3% of water that is drinking water available on Earth would be enough to sustain the human race?
On the Earth, you said on the Earth, the fresh water available can stand a population of over 26 billion. At the moment, we are just 7.5 billion. But question is not that it is not equally distributed. You have deserts one side where the maximum precipitation per annum is just less than 25 millimeter. On the other side, you have a rainforest where the annual precipitation is 3,000, 4,000 to 5,000 millimeter. So it is the inequality in distribution of water on this universe that it impacts the population living in the scarce water situation. Pakistan is one of the arid country in the world, one of the most arid country in the world. So we don't have that much of water that with the rainforest and other wet countries have. So we have to be very intelligent in managing our water resources.
Mr. Tariq,
we have to be very conservative in this.
Mr. Tariq, what measures can be
drop of water.
Mr. Tariq, what measures can be taken for a more equitable distribution of water?
For equitable distribution of water. Now that is another sad story. Because 1991 Water Apportionment Accord has given a share of water to each province. That has been agreed by all the 4 provinces. Now, within the province, if you look into the Punjab or Sindh or KPK, it's inequitable distribution of water because and even KPK and the north of KPK has abundance of water and the south of KPK doesn't have any water. It's extremely short of water. So that inequality is now the responsibility of the provincial government because after 18th Amendment, lot of responsibility has been shifted onto the provincial governments. And they are the ones that they should not only look into the share of water that they have, they should look into its equitable distribution among each district of the province. That is again a very sad story. And I think it's a criminal that on one side we are having a people who are living in one of the driest area and don't have even water for drinking, and on the other side we are wasting water producing the minimum crops at the spending more than 95% of the water, that is the tragedy. That is a mismanagement. And that's a serious issue of mismanagement and equity in distribution of water within even a province.
Mr. Tariq, what about water quality? How much water is wasted because of poor quality?
Water wasted on quality, sorry?
How much water is wasted because of its poor quality and it doesn't meet standards?
You see, wasted, poor quality, all this water is reusable. So whatever goes as municipal water, we say, agriculture waste, we say, it is something like 60 to 70% of water that is not captured at all. Similarly, there are countries which capture more than 98% of the rainwater. Pakistan is not capturing more than 20%, and that is also by default falling on the aggregated areas where it is consumed naturally. We have done no efforts in capturing the rainwater. So, there are a lot of techniques available there. So we can say that we are short of water, but we look at the mismanagement of water, the wastage of water that goes. If we manage properly, and if we conserve every drop of water, and if we reuse that water which has been used once, there are technology available. You can reuse it, recycle it. Now, Singapore was highly dependent on
Mr. Tariq, we're also currently joined with Hamad Khan, who is the CEO of WWF Pakistan. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's bring him into the conversation too. Mr. Khan, what can you tell us about climate change and how it's impacting water levels?
Okay, so for us in Pakistan, climate change is basically a water challenge. Because of the fact that like half of the water in our rivers comes from snow and glacier melt, and the rest which we get from rains and primarily from monsoon. And both obviously because of the climate change, because of the global warming, both would have an impact on our water resources. So and then secondly, when the impact, most of the studies, they say that, you know, the glaciers are melting at a faster pace, which means there will be more water in the near future.
More fresh water.
More fresh water. And then there will be less water, there will be shortage. And this is like in a country where more than 90% of the available fresh water is used in agriculture, and in a country whose economy depends on agriculture, where majority of the people's livelihood depends on, you know, so primarily we have a water economy. And because of the climate change, and that's the reason, if you look at the vulnerability, you know, if you look at the index which, you know, international research institutes, they come with, we are one of the top 7, 6, or at number 5, the most vulnerable country as far as the climate change is concerned.
Mr. Khan, so you mentioned how climate change will cause for more glaciers to melt, and that will cause more fresh water. But you also said that that would mean we will run out of water even quicker than before. Can you explain that a little?
Look, I mean, these are, you know, after the poles, the North and South poles, this range, the Hindu Kush, Karakoram, Himalayas, this is the largest reserve of, you know, glacier and ice. This is like a water bank. It's not just, you know, Pakistan. If you look at, I mean, this is also, we're talking about India, Nepal, Bhutan. I mean, this is like, you know, most of the rivers in this region, they originate from this rain. And a lot of people, you know, their life depends on the water which comes out of. So, when the studies, except for, you know, few at Karakoram, most of the glaciers, they're receding, you know, they're shrinking. And we have seen the glacier lake outburst floods. You talk to, you know, I was in northern Pakistan like 2 months ago, and you talk to the local community and they tell you the stories. They tell you, you know, real stories that this used to be a glacier, but now I don't see a glacier. Or, you know, the impact that they are facing, you know, at that, in those areas. So eventually, I think that's the reason that we say that we need to manage and govern our water resources in a proper way. Because it's not that, you know, there will be, it's like a switch that somebody will, you know, switch it off or switch it on and there will be no water, there will be less water. It's a gradual change is coming, and we've also seen, you know, change in the rainfall pattern. It's not just the snow and glacier melt. And we in this region, we are children of monsoon, you know. We have good monsoons, it has a very good impact on our crops. We have bad monsoon, you know, we have bad crops. And then it's not just the crop, it's also the related industry and the related livelihood and so on and so forth.
Mr. Tariq, now Mr. Khan mentioned how glaciers will melt, they will burst. What can we do to conserve that water that is going to come in an influx after those glaciers melt?
You see, the melt of gas, Mr. Khan said, you are going to have more water. Now, if you're going to have more water, you need some places where you can store it, conserve it. We don't have that storage capacity at the moment. Our storage capacity is depleted so fast because, you see, Indus alone brings more than 500,000 tons of sediments every day. So Tarbela is silted up fast, so Mangla has been silted up, so we have raised it another 40 feet just to increase the capacity, but Tarbela is depleting very fast. So question is that we need to have more storages where flood water and this additional glacier melt water can be stored. And once you store that, then of course you can consume that water and can use it during dry season and all that. At the moment, our carryover capacity is not more than 30 days. There are people like Aswan Dam, right in Africa, has a carryover capacity of 1,000 days. America has a carryover capacity of 900 days. Even Australia, which has a similar climate than Pakistan, has a storage capacity, carryover capacity for almost 600 days. Our storage capacity is even less than 30 days, you know. So for 30 days, if there's short of water, our reservoirs are empty. We cannot survive for that. And the droughts, the type of droughts that Mr. Khan said that climate change will have an impact. You will have a torrential and very violent type of floods, and at the same time you have a very prolonged drought. So we have no water for those droughts period. We have no storage capacity. So For all this additional water is going to come due to glacier melt, you have to create storages where you can consume that water, store that water for use during the dry season. That's how you can really meet the challenge of this glacier melt. Okay.
Mr. Tariq, a last question with you. What is the way forward? What needs to be done? What's an urgent step that must be taken?
I will tell you, first of all, we need to bring the technology in all the sectors. Technology with the main objective of water conservation and water saving. And if we do that, and use the 3R principle. 3R principle is reduce your use in every subsector of water, that is a domestic water, industrial water, agriculture water, recycle it and reuse it. That is where the additional water is going to come, and then we are very lucky. We have 1,100 kilometers of coastal area. We have a tremendous amount of seawater, and we have a tremendous amount of sunshine. Why don't we work and introduce a cheap solar technology for desalination of saline water? That will give you a tremendous amount of water. You can meet the total demand of Karachi and other cities which are at the coastal areas. That is a future that we should look into it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sardar Muhammad Tariq, for joining us. We're going to go for a short break. When we return, we're going to talk about the measures that must be taken for the conservation of water. Welcome back to Indus Special. We're in conversation with Mr. Hamad Khan. So, Mr. Hamad Khan, we were talking about how technological progress is required in order to make sure that there is enough water for the future. Do you agree with that?
I think I slightly agree, but I think there are many other things which we need to do, which we must do. That's one thing. But secondly, coming back to the argument which my colleague Sardar Tariq just shared, sometimes it's reflected or it's portrayed as, because we have limited storage capacity, and if we build a dam, that is the solution. I mean, that's not the problem. Dams, yes, we do need to improve our storage capacity, but whether we build a dam or we don't build a dam, there are so many things which we must do because of the impacts of climate change, because of the way we are managing and using and abusing our water resources. And I can share, few of them with you. The thing is that it's also a management issue. I think I agree with Sardar Tariq when he says that we need to conserve water in literally every sector, whether it's industry, whether it's domestic, whether it's like, agriculture. Literally, we are not using water, we are not treating water as a commodity, because most sectors, they treat water as like a free commodity. I mean, yes, drinking water is a basic human right, which the Constitution of Pakistan has provided to the people. And the state is responsible to provide, that facility, that right. So to provide drinking water subsidized to marginalized community, definitely. But for other sectors, they should pay the price, of water. We need to price water, because that would also encourage people to conserve water. You can see, you go to a house, it's like a big house, they're using water to irrigate their lawns, and they pay a fixed monthly bill. So there is no incentive, and same is the case with industry. They put up a deep well turbine pump, they pump water, they use it. It's like a linear thing, you use it, you throw it, there is no incentive, or compulsion to make it a closed loop.
Mr. Khan, and there's a really interesting concept called the water footprint, in which you try to identify in each and every step how much water is conserved. How do you think that could benefit if people became more aware of such a concept?
I think this is like, obviously it's very widely discussed and adopted in the developed world, that everything that we do has a footprint, and the footprint of our commodities, the footprint of our industrial processes, the footprint of an average Pakistani, is a water footprint. We are talking about water footprint here. There are so many opportunities that footprint can be reduced, and that's what I'm emphasizing a lot about the value, putting the right value for water. The second thing is that, as we said that almost 90% of the available water is used in agriculture, I think we also need to change our cropping pattern. The government needs to take some tough decisions for the long term, and that should be the vision.
But is that viable to take those steps? Because we are highly dependent on agriculture.
No, but the thing is that why are we, why did we allow sugar mills in cotton belt? You go to Rahim Yar Khan, you don't see people, the farmers growing cotton, but they have switched to sugarcane. Sugarcane is a high delta crop. Do we have water, to irrigate sugarcane farms? How much sugar do we need? How much, how many sugar mills do we need? How much area should be under sugarcane? I mean, these are the tough decisions.
Mr. Khan, so we have been discussing a lot of the scenarios existing in South Asia, but let's take a more global perspective here. So 3% of the water in the world is only fresh water. What about the 97%? What can be done with that water?
I mean, the thing is, well, I mean, 97% is like, brackish, is the sea water. And out of the 3% is, I think it's almost like less than 1% which is readily available. The other, the remaining almost 2% is the snow and the glaciers, keep that in mind that we just have like 1% of the water which is available on this planet. Yes, I think Sadat Tariq also mentioned that we need to put like more desalination plants. I mean, the thing is that countries like, in the Middle Eastern countries, the UAE states, I mean, they all use sea water. But that's where they don't have, because they don't have access to, or they have very limited fresh water. But we are very fortunate. I mean, we still do have a lot of fresh water.
What about the reports that state that Pakistan's going to run dry, the world's going to run dry? There's been so many threats of day zero looming upon countries. So when you say that, you're portraying a very optimistic picture, almost that we have enough fresh water, we don't need to go towards desalination plants.
No. My point is that we need to have an integrated approach. We need to look at the bigger picture. We need to have we need to address this in a holistic manner. A piecemeal approach, ad hocism, do this, do that, put a desalination plant there, put a small dam here, put a large dam here. That won't fix the problem. The problem is bigger than these, and obviously I'm not saying that we should not do that. We should literally, whatever is available, whatever is doable under the sun, we need to do that, for water. This is such a serious issue.
Let's move towards wastewater and seeing that as a resource that can be used. So in 2017, the UN stated that wastewater should not be seen as something just to be discarded, but rather as a resource. What can you tell us about that?
That's absolutely true. I mean, I think one can give so many examples. Singapore is one. I mean, I studied in UK. So the water that you flush in your toilet comes back in your kitchen's tap. Because literally, and then the water in my glass is the one which I flushed. But that's the reality.
So drinking water too.
Yeah, because they have such a, there is a system which is in place. There are laws to treat wastewater, right? So whether, you're a municipality or a small city or you're an industry, you have to treat your wastewater, right? And then you put the treated wastewater into a river, and downstream there will be a drinking water treatment plant. Now, that drinking water treatment plant takes water from the river, treats it, and then supplies to another town, another city. And the cycle goes on and on and on and on. I don't know how many times. So, and in this country, the unfortunate part is literally no wastewater treatment for municipalities. I mean, there are a couple of plants in Karachi, one in Islamabad, nothing in Lahore. These millions of people. All the waste water, the sewage goes into River Ravi, which has become a sewer.
What happens to fresh water when water is not treated? So for instance, in low-income countries, on average, only 8% of domestic and industrial water is treated compared to the 70% of water that is treated in more developed countries.
That is what I was sharing, that we do have environmental quality standards and they are applicable to both municipalities and to industry. And obviously there are parameters, and every industry which is like putting wastewater, untreated affluent, they have to treat it, and then they can, put it back into the water body. And same goes with the municipalities. But unfortunately, despite the fact that we do have laws, it's like no enforcement, no implementation, and so we are polluting all our resources. The second thing is that the groundwater abstraction is also not regulated, which means that everybody is free to put up tube wells and pump water. And they, it's like literally a free commodity. Just to give you one example, we did an audit and we compared the textile processing in Karachi and in like Lahore or Faisalabad. Now, in Karachi, the industries, they use water from the tankers. So they are very efficient. If you look at the per unit of water consumed per meter of fabric, it's like, 30% or 40% more efficient than the facilities in Lahore or Faisalabad, because they pump water, they use it, and then they, throw it. But some of the manufacturers who supply products to, who export it, they have the demand from their buyers, and they put up like treatment plants. But rest is literally free for all. And same goes with other industrial sectors.
We're joined with Mr. Yasin Theba, the Director of Vision Group in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you for joining us. So, Mr. Theba, we were discussing the importance of groundwater and how it's extracted without regulation in this part of the world. Can you tell us the importance of groundwater in Africa, for instance?
Well, in recent years in South Africa, even though we're surrounded by water, in recent years we're seeing a lot of drought. 2015 has been the worst drought that we've seen in Southern Africa. And had it not been for groundwater, we wouldn't have been able to sustain some of our farming. As you know, South Africa is a great exporter of farming. And it was only through groundwater that we were able to navigate ourselves. The economy was able to navigate through the drought so that we could sustain ourselves and continue with our exports. And those farms, while a lot of farms did close down during the 2015, 2016, 2017 drought, it was through groundwater that we were able to sustain ourselves.
And Mr. Theba, what about the recharge groundwater? What is the concept behind that?
Well, to make it sustainable, there's a number of groundwater initiatives in South Africa. But to make it sustainable, we need to continuously reuse water, recycle some of the equipment that we're using to extract the water from the ground. In South Africa, we're using boreholes, and that water is being continuously recycled. So we're asking people to basically use the grey water once they've done with their washing, to use that water for the plants. Once they're done with showering, to use the water for washing the dishes and that kind of thing. And we've been through the process of teaching people, especially in the urban areas in South Africa, of how to become more sustainable by reusing groundwater.
Can you tell us, Mr. Theba, a little about the methods you've taught people in reusing water, reusing water in this sense? South
Africa, through the drought in South Africa, we've seen major challenges. Firstly, getting water to people. Our challenge in South Africa was due to municipalities basically just being mismanaged. So we had a major challenge to get water into some of these areas, and we've gone on campaigns with state, with private business, on making people more aware and how to continuously use. The schools are an important place. When a child opens his tap to brush his teeth, a simple thing like just closing the tap while he's brushing his teeth, you are saving at least 3-4 liters of water. And I mean, the campaign starts there. If in our homes we can save water, we can change the mindset. Going forward, we can change mindset. Flushing the toilet. Very often we flush the toilet 3-4 times in the morning. All those small significant changes make a difference. And if we can make those small changes in our homes, it will have an impact in our businesses. We become more water conscious in our schools. But it starts in every home. It starts with every child, every adult becoming more conscious of how we're using our water.
Mr. Teba, so you mentioned very simple stuff creating awareness, but I wonder how much can we integrate technological advancement and innovation in creating more awareness, and how important is that?
You know, we need to continuously look at alternatives. We need to continuously become more water wise. I think from government levels, they need to look at ways where we can look at infrastructure using technology, using alternatives, especially now. I mean, like South Africa in our farming industry, farmers are looking at ways of reusing water, creating wet tables underground, which reuses water. Those are some of the changes that we can make. South African land makes a big portion of South African land makes up farming. And we're looking at technology in the farms, using boreholes, using water wells, using water tables, JoJo tanks, basically conserving rainwater, so that we can become more water wise on our farms.
Mr. Khan, so we're talking about how agriculture almost uses up to 70% and more water of freshwater resources. What can technology do to make sure that agricultural practices are more efficient?
So 70% globally, but in our case, it's 90%. So technology can play a very important role. I can give you some specific examples. So most of the land in Pakistan is not leveled, and we still have this traditional Warabandi system where there's an outlet, and and then I as a farmer I get like my water from that outlet. But if my land is not leveled, it would take maybe twice the time to reach at the end of the farm. But if I level my land, it would take like maybe 50% of the time is saved and 50% of the water is saved. So that's where I think that's where the government has also started using that's technology, using laser land levelers and providing such facilities, such technology at the doorsteps of the farmer at a subsidized rate. That's very good. The second is example where innovative kind of agronomic practices, or the way, like instead of suppose this flood irrigation, you put like trenches, you put or you make bed and furrows, you irrigate the alternate furrow.
Is that the same as drip irrigation?
No, drip is where you put these pipes, and then, but that's like sometimes energy, you need energy, or otherwise you need a kind of a
so that requires
head.
more resources.
Yeah, I mean but like bed and furrow, or using leveling your land, this is something which is obviously that also needs some equipment. And the poor farmers, the small farmers, I think they struggle, because most of them, they do subsistence farming, but that's where the role of the government is there, and the donors, they should, and provide that facility, maybe not free, charge something, but it is subsidized rate, because at the end of the day, that's where you save water using the technology. If you really want to encourage farmers to adopt these good practices, latest technologies, I think you have to provide them, you have to facilitate them.
Mr. Khan, we'll talk about individual governments after a while, but I want to ask Mr. Teba, do you think that the international community is doing enough to conserve water?
We can never say, as long as we're seeing droughts in Africa, we can never say that governments are doing enough. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done. That said, there's been some good advances over the past few years. The introduction of desalination plants in Cape Town, South Africa, introduction of some of the plants that we're seeing up in Africa. This is a major advancement. The ability to take seawater, desalinate it, and provide it to the public is a major advancement. But I can't say that we're doing enough until we continue seeing areas suffering from drought. We're seeing rural areas without water, and some of these areas, the water is not flowing very far from them, but it's just mismanagement. It's mismanagement of infrastructure, and we're seeing a lot of it in Africa. But I am happy to say that there has been a more conscious effort by the international community in conferences. There has been an awareness, and it has been on the agenda. But we'd like to see more.
Mr. Seba, you mentioned mismanagement of infrastructure. Can you tell us how infrastructure can be improved in order to make sure that water is managed in a better way?
It's as simple as maintenance of water pumps. In South Africa, we're seeing a change of government, and over the past few years, municipalities haven't been maintaining some of the infrastructure. So while in the major cities we get inadequate water all the time, in some of the rural areas we're seeing gross mismanagement of infrastructure. So it comes down to simple maintenance of water infrastructure, and then again getting water to people. As technology improves, better pumps come up, it becomes more efficient. Recycling, installation of water reserves when we do have good rains through the year. Are we conserving that water? Are we just letting it flow past us and into the rivers? We need to conserve the water that we have when we've got water, and when we haven't got water, we need to be wise and not waste the water.
Khan, a leak of 1 drop per second wastes almost 113 gallons of water per month. So these are very small things that people need to look towards to make a big change, is it not?
That's true. When you talked about, and I think Yasin was also talking about infrastructure, this is also, I think, quite challenging in our country. Most of the water mains, the water supply system, they are old. You see a lot of leakages, and then it's not just you're losing precious potable water. It's also because then people install these small pumps. When they pump, there's a negative pressure, and the result is that the water which is like outside of these mains, it's sucked inside and it pollutes the water, and that's the reason that sometimes there is a microbial contamination in your tap water. So improving, ensuring that the right appropriate infrastructure is placed, and to plug such leakages. You gave just a small example, and even as an individual, brushing your teeth, and if the tap is running, just calculate the liters of water. Shaving at the tap is running, just calculate the liters of water, and then multiply it with number of people, the community. One can only understand the importance of water conservation when one has an idea or visits areas like go to Cholistan. You go to Cholistan and then miles and miles, and you don't see a sign of water, and you see people, women, traveling few hours to just get a pot full of water, just to ensure that the children and the family has drinking water, and then taking it back all the way, spending like at least 6-7 hours. So, and then we do not realize that because we feel that we take it for granted. Whenever we open the tap, there should be water. I still remember, maybe when we were like
Why do we have that thought process?
Because we don't recognize that there's a water shortage. We don't recognize this is a precious commodity. It's free, We pay like 500 rupees and then we played our role, whatever, and how, doesn't matter how much water do we use.
Do you think if water allocation is given for instance, in quotas or something more drastic, that would change mentality?
We need to, that's also something I was just, telling you about, that I remember when we were growing up, like, and then it was not that 24/7 you get water. There was like, I think a few hours in the morning, few hours in the evening, and people used to store water. There used to be like buckets in our toilets, where my mom, I still remember, used to store water. And then there was a quota, okay, half bucket for, taking a bath. Not like, open the shower and then stand there for like 30 minutes or 45 minutes, enjoy the water. Well, I mean, that's a luxury. You have to understand that. There are people who do not have access to drinking water, and you're spending like 1 hour under the shower, excuse me.
Yeah. Mr. Seba, do you think that people have become more aware to the fact that water is not a luxury where you're living?
When we often visit schools teaching children and how to become more aware, and we often start our presentation with a very simple slogan: a drop of water is worth more than a sack of gold to a thirsty man. And when you think about it, you only appreciate water when you have to go through an experience where there isn't water. And I think in South Africa 2015, when we had water shedding or water conservation, where certain areas were totally shut down and access to water was denied for certain hours so that we could build up reserves in our reservoirs, in our tanks. And I think that was an important lesson for South Africans. But again, we don't realize the importance of water until we will be without it. But it will be an expensive lesson. So it's important that we, day by day, become more conscious, and not just with government or not just in schools, but at all levels. It is very, very important we become more conscious. More effort needs to be done. And it takes a collective. It takes government. It takes business. It takes communities. It takes mosques. It takes churches. It takes students. It takes every individual, because we all rely on water. There's nothing that everyone relies on but water. We all need water. A doctor very famously said in our presentations, he keeps on saying that we can even do without love, but we can't do without water. We need water. And one of our slogans is water is life. So without water, people need to realize that we don't want to pay for that lesson.
Mr. Thiba, but how do we make people realize? How do we develop that civic sense, especially in the industrial part of the world where they are using water as a good that is needed for products to be produced? How do we develop that civic sense?
It takes campaigns. It takes schools playing their part. It takes continuous campaigns on how to be water wise. We need to be water wise. Every drop that we use is a drop too much. We need to see, do we actually need to be using water? Should we be washing our car 10 times a day? Yeah. But we need to drive this message in our mosques, in our churches, in our temples. We need to drive that message and get down to every household. And that's where it's going to make a difference.
Mr. Thiba, what measures did your community take towards creating this awareness? Did you co-opt community leaders? Did you go door to door? What happened there?
Initially we looked at ways that we can save ourselves from another drought, and fortunately in South Africa currently we are getting sufficient rain, but what we did is in our communities, we've approached community centers, we approached homes, estates, complexes where people are staying, and we've introduced JoJo tanks. It's big tanks that collect the rain, we harvest the rainwater, and that water is used to water the plants, to wash the dishes, and we make people more aware. The sight of a tank at your house collecting water is a lesson that, we need to conserve rainwater. We need to use water wisely. We cannot just continue using the water. A simple thing like shaving. We leave the water to run. If people see that we need to conserve every little drop, it makes a difference. So in our area, we've asked people to introduce JoJo tanks, things that conserve rainwater. We've asked people to use boreholes, so to water your garden, to wash your car, to wash your dishes. We've asked people to fill up your swimming pools. We've asked people to use borehole water so that there's a less of a strain on the water provided through the taps from the municipality.
Mr. Khan, how important is it to preserve rainwater in this way here? Isn't the measure JoJo tanks something that can be implemented here very easily?
Definitely. And I think, again, we have so many good examples which we can replicate, which we can scale up. But the thing is, we need to, look into this with a different angle also. So what we are doing in the cities, there's more concretization. So we are getting rid of the green belts. And now green belts used to, do two things. If there are rain, they used to act as a buffer, and the water used to, trickle down and recharge the groundwater. Now, because there's more concrete, there's what happens is there's a flash flood. When the rain comes, it just water goes and it chokes our, sewer systems and the storm water drains. So we need to, encourage more plantation, more vegetation cover, and more green areas,
The government seems to be doing that well now with the. I
with
see
the
you
present
rolling your
government, I mean,
eyes.
there's like, the thing is that the previous government, unfortunately, the focus was more on infrastructure, underpasses, flyovers, concrete building. That's the development, But looking at the plans and the manifesto, the present government is like more green, and we have attached high expectations, with this government.
On that point, I'd like to ask you, isn't planting green also requires awareness? For example, planting native trees as opposed to imported trees, doesn't that also create an exacerbation of the problem?
That's absolutely true. And we've seen that in Karachi and in Lahore, first it was eucalyptus and then conocopus everywhere because it's easily available, it's not very expensive, it doesn't require a lot of care. You plant it and it grows like this. So, but what about shisham? What about neem? What about kikar? What about acacia? What about jamun? There's a long list of indigenous species. And they have a purpose, they're good for bird, they're good for people, they're good for soil, they're good for environment. And then, obviously, conocopus is also a tree, but the kind of water which it requires, the benefits, I mean, compared to the indigenous species, well, very few. So I think you're absolutely right. Planting the right species, is critically important.
Mr. Taiba, just a last one with you. What do you think needs to be done more in order to mitigate this global crisis?
Well, I think at government level, we need to engage with countries that are conserving water. We know that in Europe, there's some countries that are doing it brilliantly. And some of these countries are even landlocked. But yet they've got the citizens have got access to clean drinking water, no matter where they live. So I think at government level there needs to be more engagement, and I hope that engagement will filter through to make a difference in individual homes. That said, again, a model that we've used in South Africa is we went to schools, and I think schools need to in the syllabus daily incorporate things that make a difference to our consumption. Teaching children how to make a difference every day in school will ultimately result in the homes, the attitude in the home towards water being changed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yasiba, for joining us. Mr. Khan, on that same point, what does the government need to do? What does the United Nations and all the governments need to do to mitigate this crisis?
I think first I would like to endorse some of the points mentioned by Mr. Taiba. I think it's critically important. Water conservation should be part of the curriculum. I mean, the children are the future policy and decision maker. They should know. They should, be sensitized about the critical nature of this challenge. Now, coming to the donor agencies, UN departments, government, I think it's important, as I said earlier, we need to value water. If we don't value water, I think the incentives or you don't see a driver to conserve water. Whether it's service station, whether you're washing off your verandas and your driveways or your cars 3 times a day, there won't be any. Same goes with the industry, same goes with the agriculture sector. But for agriculture sector, for small farmers, for the use of technology, government, we also need to subsidize that. The role of donor agencies, I think, is also important, whether it's support through microcredit, whether it's support through appropriate, having an access or providing an access to appropriate technology. I think that's where such donors can also play a very effective role.
Mr. Khan, who will suffer the most if we run out of water? Because there are these perceptions that, for instance, of course, the poor will be at the lowest end of the spectrum, and there will be a system in place that will provide enough water to those who can afford it. What do you have to say about that?
I think, take the example of Cape Town. Who had imagined in their wildest dreams that there will be a long queue of people? So at the end of the day, it would be people. I mean, obviously, like the wildlife and other species would also suffer because water is life. And that's the reason we also say water is life and water is everybody's business. It's not, one individual, one sector, one government. Literally, no. It's everybody's business, and everybody has to play a role. As an individual, as an industry, as a shopkeeper, as a businessman, as a government, as a politician, as a policy maker. So until unless, again and again, I would say, value the water, and then it's everybody's business. We need to take action at all levels in all sectors. It's primarily an issue of bad management and governance. We also need to take some tough decisions. And
What tough decisions?
Like, the cropping pattern. I just gave you one example. And pricing the water. These are the tough decisions. Not every government can take, because they won't be popular decisions. But good leader, if they are not that much worried about the votes, and they're more worried about the country, about the future generation, then the good leaders, they take tough decisions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hamad Khan, for joining us. Boutros Ghali stood up in the UN in 1985, and he stated that the Third World War will not be over politics, but over water. If we want to prevent that from happening, we have to make sure we take tough decisions. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We'll see you again tomorrow.